So for decades, I've researched history. It's a true passion of mine, and um, I once got into even native history, which opened up a whole new door. But I realized that I know very little about the Navy or mariners, and I've got the fellow that's going to shed a little light on that. We're going to go down that rabbit hole, and I'd like to introduce Tom Hurlbut. Tom, a pleasure.
A very great pleasure.
Second time you've given me this privilege. Once on your boat, we were under sail, and that was pretty cool. But so maybe you could shed a little light. Well, first of all, you're a man of many hats. So not only are you the Commodore, is that your rank?
Correct.
You're also in the 1812 group. You're the sort of leader or the Major Tom. Did you say?
That's correct. I'm one of the senior officers in the American Lines.
There we go. So we need to galvanize at times too. We take off red coats and put on blue ones, and it's all for history. So maybe. So I'm curious. What was life like for? I got this image of bateaux because we're here at the United Empire Loyalist Landing weekend event, and I'm thinking of these people crossing Lake Ontario in open bateaux, and I'm just wondering what was it like to be a mariner?
Well, certainly the challenges of being a mariner on freshwater are significantly different than those in the ocean. There are advantages and disadvantages because of the rapids that demark freshwater from saltwater, say at Montreal or Niagara Falls or any of those. The larger vessels didn't make it here, and so all of the vessels that were used, whether they were canoes or bateaux, were constructed here. And as such, because of the challenges of transportation of supplies and things, they tended to be smaller and more functional. So that's certainly one of the challenges, was that the boats themselves were smaller.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned too some of the things that were advantage was they didn't have to cart water. I'm thinking in infantry trying to keep brigades or regiments hydrated. You didn't have that issue.
Right. Significant difference between the vessels on the lakes and the vessels on the oceans would be, of course, their need to store things, and that would dictate the number of decks, for example. So they didn't need to store 6 months worth of food as a naval warship would need to, and they didn't need to store fresh water because it was all available to them right there. They'd only be at sea for a few days at a time. And so that there's a significant difference. As recently as the War of 1812, for example, the ships themselves were probably more powerful than their ocean-going counterparts of the same size because they could carry more guns, because they didn't have to carry food and water for all of that length of time. It's interesting differences.
So the people that are under your command, what are they issued? Like I'm trying to think of. I know what military have, I know what cavalry have, but I don't know what that person on that vessel was. He similar issues like one wool blanket sort of thing.
Well, certainly in service to the government in various roles, there would be a level of pay, and it was pretty comparable across the board between lake sailors and ocean-going sailors to a point. But there would, again, the advantages would creep in because they would only be at sea or on the lakes for a few days at a time. The food would generally be better because they could access the food that lands people could have more regularly. So that would be better. In terms of the clothing that they would wear, it would be similar because of the roles because of the job that they're doing. And sailors' garb is extremely practical at the time. So freshwater sailors would have similar things. Then again, when you start to get into the other areas, the inland waters, the rivers and things like that, the boats would get smaller. Again, the clothing would probably more reflect the area that they're at. Voyageurs, for example, were dressed much more like the indigenous peoples than, say, professional sailors would have been who handled ships or larger vessels on the lakes.
Thinking, obviously, you're on the water, so fish would be a big part of the diet as well.
And I guess that it depends an awful lot on the quality of the fishing. What I'm led to believe it was much more plentiful in those days than it is today. But at the same time, if you're dealing with the European mindset, and most of these people were descendants, a lot of these people were descendants of Europeans, they would probably want more of a European style diet. So maybe things like beef and pork would be more to their preference. But again, access to it would be much, much better than a fellow in the middle of the Atlantic.
What about sleeping? So you're carrying tentage, I presume. You're going to shore to sleep, or you're not sleeping on an open bateau.
And again, it depends entirely on the circumstance. But because they didn't need to store a lot of stuff on, say, the lake ships, then there'd be more room for them to sling hammocks underneath. But again, they'd only be out for a few days at a time before they'd be ashore. In terms of the bateaux and canoes, I guess it depends on how urgent the mission was as to whether you might continue to travel overnight. In which case, there's no time to pitch a tent or even build any kind of shelter. You'd wrap yourself in a blanket and take your turn sleeping when your compatriot was paddling or rowing away.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So the thinking in terms of back to diet for a bit, hardtack was a common thing, right?
Absolutely.
So did sailors have bad teeth? I'm not eating a lot of hardtack in my life. That's tongue in cheek. But.
Okay. I would say that their teeth would reflect the diet that they were on. So
yeah, there you go.
Lots of sugars and things would be processed foods are hard on teeth. We know that today. They didn't know it so much in those days, but then they didn't process as much food. So
no, very little processed food. So you're going to get out sailing today. How many ships do you have here? Do you call them ships?
Well, strictly speaking, a ship is a vessel that can carry another vessel. Although I think when you get into the idea of submarines, it gets a little confusing because submariners call their vessels boats. We have 6 boats here this weekend, all traditionally rigged, and it should be a lot of fun. We have a couple of scenarios planned, and I like when we get involved in unstructured tacticals, how your skills as a sailor or a mariner
really come out.
It highlights them.
So do you have this sort of a challenge, like a game? Somebody's going to win at the end of the day?
In effect, this is the plan for this is the naval establishment, of which I lead as the Commodore, a tactical gaming weekend where we have concocted some particular scenarios that we need to play out.
Perfect.
And while we don't have any official prizes as yet, because this is kind of the first of its type, well, depending upon how successful we are in engaging people, there could be prizes in the future.
Yeah, interesting. So you all have swivel guns mounted?
We do. We're all armed to the teeth as much as our boats can manage.
Yeah, more than one swivel gun on a boat.
We have a couple of vessels that are armed with at least 2.
Wow, it's going to be fun
and loud.
Can I get out on one?
Absolutely.
All right. Actually, sadly, I have to leave today. But I did get out last time. It was just a grand experience. Wow. But anyway, next year, are you back next year?
It depends on the host. The host sometimes likes a year off in between.
Yeah.
So we'll see if we're back next year. That hasn't been decided as far as
I gotta say that I'm in your marquee here, and your Commodore's digs are a little better than my shebang down the way on the company line.
Well, I once was at an event where a young fellow showed up with a pole and a piece of canvas on a motorcycle, and he was very proud of the fact that he could pack up and leave in about 20 minutes. But no, he didn't have the opportunity to sleep in this sort of thing, and this does take some time to set up. But I'm a Commodore, so I've got hundreds and hundreds of men underneath me, and I just say, do this,
set it up, right? Perfect.
Until there's a mutiny.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you taking the time. And,
always a pleasure.
Yeah, and music last night was grand. We have to do that again.
I had a lot of fun. Yes.
Great. Thanks. I got a lot to learn. You're going to put me down that rabbit hole. Now I'm going to start researching life on the water.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Right.